Today, on a very special Tangents. I want to start this conversation today with a little parable that will be featured in our upcoming piece written by you. And the premise of the piece is about achievement confusion and the difference between effort and results. And the writing team found this great story of three bricklayers. And all three of them were working, toiling away, and someone came up to each one and asked them, "What are you doing?" They were building a church. So bricklayer number one said, "What does it look like I'm doing? I'm laying down some brick." And bricklayer number two said, "I'm building a church." And bricklayer number three said, "I'm on a mission from God," which, also...
I'm on a mission from God.
Also Elwood Blues famously said. But those are three different archetypes and different ways to look at the application of effort. And what was interesting about your premise was that when you hit a certain point in your effort and you don't know what's on the other side, it can be very confusing, and it can also be very upsetting if you're not ready for it.
So, this must be the one about achievement malaise.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. That's a tough one for me, and it always surprises me. It usually always comes from long-term goals or business goals for the company from a maybe a monetary or a growth standpoint. And every single time we hit one, I get depressed, and the joy of victory is so fleeting. It almost doesn't exist for me because I see it coming, and I tend to I don't want to call it celebrate early, but I know it's coming, and I can. You and I are both giant fans of not just playing checkers, playing chess, and not just playing chess, playing 3D chess. And if we're really lucky, we'll rope in a fourth dimension, and we'll work with time as well. And because that's so frequently done, gaming out scenarios, it's like, well, this was once you start seeing all of the things that you thought you were going to see, this was expected. You almost rob yourself of the joy. And it's like, now what? I got to the top. Now what? Now what? What's next? What's next? And I find it really hard to enjoy almost any victory. But I used to beat myself. Now I just accept it as that's part of who I am. And I focus on that end point. But the moment I reach it, it is now irrelevant. It's it is as irrelevant as it was important to meet. It's very weird.
Yeah, I think it's a byproduct of setting goals that, whether they're long-term or short-term, we had when we first started the company, and we would set these goals that we couldn't see the other side of because we didn't know if we could even get there. So it became this kind of process of like, well, let's just get to here. And if we do, well, good on us, and we'll figure out what we're going to do from there. And for a while there, it was more of a sprint mentality than like a marathon mentality. And now I think one thing that we look at, and I think both of us celebrate, is that we're winning more marathons than we are just sprints. On the creative side, I try to do sprints in a way that never lets me let up. So I'm tricking myself into thinking that the marathon is just a big like grouping of short sprints, and I'm breaking it down that way. So like even when I'm having a rough week in terms of like ideas, or I've left myself plenty of things to play with and plenty of breadcrumbs for like, like thanks past me.
Yeah, I appreciate that way. And I look at it more as a long obstacle course, because there's, which I enjoy, by the way. It's like, all right, here's this obstacle course, and here's all the different things that I'm going to possibly see, but I never know what's going to show up that day.
Yeah.
So I have to be like, oh, all right, boom, here comes the hurdle, but all right, it's only one. I thought it was going to be three, but instead of 3 hurdles after that, it's actually the rope swing over the water. And all right, quick from moving from the hurdle to the rope swing and all of that. And that sort of long, that constant adjustment and movement, while it can be tiring, it emboldens me. I get bored. I mean, because before we started this, I changed jobs. We started this 15 years ago now, maybe more, something like that. Yeah, 15.
Yeah.
Like in earnest, it's about 15 years.
When we
quit our jobs, and I got fired and you quit your job.
We were co-conspirators for a long time.
Yes.
In the idea of one day doing something, but which is wild to think about. But yeah, I would say 15 years. I'd say 2012 was probably the
2010 was when we went.
2010 was when we
2012 was when things started to click.
Yeah.
So we basically had no jobs for 2 years while we kind of searched for our way, and things really started to click for us around 2012. But but before all of this, I mean, I changed jobs every 12 to 18 months. It was up. I got bored incredibly fast. And
Well,
why am I here?
I think that's the value of what you do for you here is, for me, I'm in a constant state of inspiration and in a constant state of sprint. Even one of the ways that I explain it to people now is I'm about to sprint through this, and I can do it really fast if everything goes properly. If someone
but you don't use that terminology as like the sprints that are that were in vogue like 3 years ago.
No.
And I think that's an important thing to point out, because those sprints are, while they give you focus, they also mean that you lose your periphery.
Yeah. And
Your sprints are very, very different from that.
Yeah, and the way I look at it is literally like I'm running fast, or I'm riding a bicycle really fast for a short period of time. So maybe there are these bursts. You're picturing me on a bike.
I picture you on the bicycle.
I probably look like a Muppet riding a bike.
No, that does harken back to that double bicycle that we bought that one time. Remember that?
Yeah, I've got to remember to put a picture of that up in the description of this tangent, because that's funny. I still have all that stuff, but the way I look at it is there are things that happen in life that are out of my control. Someone throwing a stick in the spokes of my bike while I'm going really fast is going to mess me up or trip me up while I'm running. And so I always kind of add this caveat that's like, yeah, I'm going to move really fast on this, and I'm aiming for Wednesday, and it may be earlier than that, but Wednesday's the day that if I get tripped up, I know I could still hit. And, I end up in this sort of perpetual state. Maybe bursts is a better way to describe it, but I know that on the other side of a burst is the requirement to chill out. And I've given myself permission to have
rest is hard work.
It really is. It's there's no better way to put it, especially when you're like, I believe in that parable that we're both mission from God guys. So anything we do, it's easy to deploy it as a strategy to continue the mission. And rest is one of those things that there's a physical gain that you get from resting. You feel better, you know, all that stuff. But if you put it in the, like, if you deploy it in the nature of like to meet the mission, then it often fails for me, because it's in that act of defiantly not doing anything that I find what I need to do next. But if I say, oh, you know, if we like systematized it somehow, like I see
like
these companies
this
like
is the rest time during this period, and
you have a rest day. We're all going to take Friday off and work 4-day
well,
work
yeah,
days.
that whole idea of it's 4-day weeks, or you know, these circumscribed times in which you can respond to email or do all that stuff. And I mean, those systems not for us. You know, we have that saying here of act like an adult, get treated like an adult. And I wouldn't expect anyone here to have a huge problem with me sending an email at 7 p.m. at night, just like I shouldn't have a huge problem with them not responding to it at 7 p.m. tonight. And as long as we're all adults about that, we can have a system where everyone can find their own way. It's interesting that you bring this up, because just yesterday, or no, 2 days ago, Sarah, our new brand ambassador, she called me up and said, hey, I was wondering if the company would be willing to go in for like halves on me on a co-working space, because all of us work from home. You know, we have our office, but all of us, you know, work from home. And she said, I figured the worst you could say is no. And my first thought is, well, number one, we're not going to pay half, we're going to pay for it. So I called her and said, look, certainly go check this thing out, go for it for a month, see what it's like, you know, let me know if you feel that it's valuable. There you go. And she goes, well, I just want you to understand, like, what. I go, look, I don't need to understand why you think you need it. That's not the point. I don't, just like you don't need to understand how I work. Because let me tell you, I work in a certain way. Matt works in a certain way. You know, Lori, John, everyone here works in a certain way that is best for them, that maybe the others would not understand, right? But it's not our place to understand. It's our place to support so that the result exists. I don't need to understand why for 2 hours a day your house is a little hectic and you need to go somewhere else. You don't need to understand why I run my house like a mausoleum, and if a mouse farts, I get upset.
Yeah.
We don't need to understand those things. What we need to do is respect that other people have different ways of achieving results. So what we do need to understand is, what is the desired result? That's where we have to all agree. But beyond that, no agreement is necessary.
And it's such it feels like it's become such a natural part of our culture. But when you look, like, I read an article this morning about the tech company Zapier, and they did an experiment last week. 1 week of no meetings. That was it. Like,
Yeah,
this was
welcome to our company for the last 4 years.
This was article worthy that you guys are using asynchronous communication and it's working better for you than no meetings. Yeah. Well, then I guess not no meetings, but meetings all the time. And they're like, I was like, wow, this is, and we're always on the edge of this stuff. Like, before COVID happened, we were already very remote. And we understood remote working very well, because there's a component to remote working that isn't related to, like, the company operations. Like, yes, you do away with meetings. Yes, you do away with all this stuff. But, like, you also, as a human being, need to understand what your desired result is, so that you're at least working in that direction. You know, I'll use you as an example. Like, you may get up in the morning and read for 2 hours or an hour or whatever it is, and then you may go for a stroll out in your garden. But you know what you're working towards that day, that week, that month, that year, and you're comfortable in that pace.
And it's my decision, not because I own part of this company, but because of how we operate. It is my decision how I layer my days, my weeks, my months, and my years. And one could say, well, of course you guys can do that. You're a small company. I disagree. While we are a small company, we can work like take our team and say, all right, now that's a department in a Fortune 500 company. There's no reason why all those departments cannot understand their goals and operate in this asynchronous manner. Meetings for the sake of their existence or getting together, many times what is happening is there's a lot of thoughtless palaver going on instead of a well thought out response plan, etc. I think there's some methods that you can use. I think there's I'll call it the Bezos method there of everyone reads, takes 2 or 3 minutes to read a page or two about the purpose of this meeting, and then you proceed from there. I hear from so many folks about meeting exhaustion and meeting after meeting after meeting with the end being almost nothing. And leaving no time for execution and even less time for thought.
We fell into that trap for a couple of years. We had a larger creative team, and
It was a meeting for the meeting.
you have meetings about meetings, and then you have a meeting to discuss the meetings, and then you get frustrated with that output, so you default to a standing meeting every day. And let me tell you something, there isn't much to talk about every day, even in a very busy season and a very busy agency. So what ended up happening was that there were people that were using these meetings as entertainment. So like you get your fulfillment for what you achieve that day by meetings. Right, and you actually accomplish nothing.
And I was in meetings all day. I was doing things.
Right, but you
achieving.
weren't.
What is it? I'm going to butcher it. Sound and fury representing nothing.
Right, yeah.
Maybe I didn't butcher it.
No, it was pretty good.
I'll pat myself on the back.
But it's an interesting thing that still happens a lot, and I met a new friend. Her daughter goes to school with mine, and she's a director at PricewaterhouseCoopers. And directors are kind of like, think of them like SVPs, I guess you'd call it. We were talking about the emergence of VR headsets in the meeting world, and how PwC and other big organizations are not necessarily pulling people back to the office, but they are shipping people headsets, and then you all get together in a Horizon workroom or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, but that's the same problem.
It's functionally the same. It doesn't actually. It'll save you money on your square foot lease,
right? And fuel and all that stuff,
Sure.
right, for your employees or however you structure it. But the distraction still exists, just like a lot of us went from meeting in person around a conference room table to, in the grand scheme of a week, you'd have 3 meetings a day if you're all in the same space together, which is way too much, but that happens. It was now Zoom, and you could fit 6.
Well, I think a lot of meeting culture, not all of it, but a lot of it comes from fear of personal accountability for results. One of the equations, if you call it that we solved after we decided that the structure that we had for our agency was no longer conducive to the kind of environment we, as partners, wanted to work within. The idea of just an absolutely unforgivable results and accountability environment, and not unforgivable from the standpoint of you're terrible if you don't meet this. It's that this is how you are judged and structured, and this is how your role is looked at, not how many hours you're behind your desk, how many emails you respond to, how many meetings you sit in, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, you could have a job where how many meetings you're in is conducive to your performance. For example, say you're a sales development rep. Well, if you're a sales development rep, you either want to be trying to get meetings or in meetings. That's what your focus is. Yeah. Or if your job is email outreach, you better be sent. It might not be volume, right? Because you have to imagine that, sure, you can send 1,000 emails that do nothing, and you can send one that's awesome and works. So there's balance to all these things. None of this is an extreme, right? It isn't no meetings ever. It isn't all meetings all the time. I will say I think the line is very close to no meetings ever. I don't know the last time all of us met in person. I also can't recall the last time we all did it virtually either. So
as a person that doesn't really, like, I'm very capable of thinking on my feet, but the price that I pay for thinking on my feet is that it robs me of other things that I could be processing or working on. So what I appreciate about no meetings and asynchronous communication is that I can absorb what you're asking of me and construct a well thought out and intentional response, as opposed to often people get together in a meeting room, nobody quite knows what the meeting is about, and then there's one person that runs a meeting that kind of puts everybody on the spot. And if you're not a on your feet thinker, a very unacceptable response in the corporate world is, let me think about that and I'll get back to you.
Which is, of course, silly, but
people should be able to
absolutely
say that.
And let me put some thought into that.
Let me consider that.
But the flip side of that is many people will use that as an excuse to not actually provide value to the group. And that's where the whole accountability things are. Oh, you know what? Individual XYZ always says, let me think about that, but then they never come back with anything. Maybe we got an empty suit here.
Yeah.
Like the idea of, we need to reimagine this. Okay, and that's fine, but do you really have anything? Or are you just saying that because you have nothing? Just admit that you got nothing. I have no problem. I got nothing. I know that anything with you and I where we meet has almost exclusively been inferior to something where I sit down, I write about it, you look at it, you write, and we go back and forth that way. Every great thing we've done over the past 24 months with the business has almost exclusively been the result of a free-flowing conversation. Not meetings have like agendas and things. You and I, it's jazz. We're back and forth.
Yeah.
We're talking, and then from that we disperse.
Yep.
And that's where the ideas come from.
Well, we have to get high-level agreement on goals, and then once we understand what we mutually agree on the goal, then it's time to go back to the lab individually and play around, and then we share conclusions and we share results and we share ideas after that. And I think that's the structure that I'm trying to adopt more with our creative team, is because the early feedback I was getting about no meetings was not like, no one was at first saying, I miss meetings, but the work was starting to suffer because people weren't as inspired as they could be by a very long-winded document that I put a lot of effort into writing, and I think it was inspiring, but not everybody gets inspired by the written word. And some people want to vibe off of the energy of the person with the idea. So we're going to be moving this into that similar process where we have these freestyle conversations about it, but it needs to be backed up with the accountability. And before, that was where we struggled, is we had the jazz, but it wasn't,
nothing beyond
it wasn't recorded.
Yeah, and even with you and I, we do that. At the end of one of those, all right, so what's kind of the next move here? Who's going to do what? And that like last 5 minutes is very, very important, because that's one of the benefits of when I say a partnership in the structural form from a business standpoint. Why I think partnerships are one of the best structures, and I think giving up part of your ownership so that you have someone else that you are ultimately accountable to beyond yourself. Maybe I'm sure there are people out there that can own 100% of a company and be accountable to themselves. That's not me. I need someone else to not fail. What I mean by that is not that someone else is going to help me not fail. I need someone else who I don't want to let down.
Yeah.
Because I can let myself down,
Yeah.
and it sucks, but I can do it. It's really tough to let someone else down.
Yeah. And, this might be a two-part tangent.
Two-part tangent.
We're on 27 minutes, which lately our stuff has been getting shorter and shorter. But that happened recently, where we had a vendor flake on us in a big way, and you and I talked about it at great lengths, what we would do about it, and I said, well, I think it's the quickest way is for me to step in and do this, and I get easily inspired by a new mission. I appreciate that you don't manipulate or exploit that very much, because I can be a shiny object person and just go with it. But I felt like it was going to be an easy W for us, for me to just take it on and work on it. I had to learn some new stuff, but I always get interested in that. But you apologized to me, and it was like unsettling. Like, I got it, and I was like, oh, yeah, it happens, but I get where you're coming from. Like, this shouldn't have happened, and I'm partially accountable for it, and I'm just saying, hey, sorry about that. And it was an interesting moment, because I got that, and I kind of just sat on it for a little bit, like, what do I say to this? Because we're both rowing in the same direction, right? And so, but I do the same thing on the other side. I hold myself very accountable to clients liking the work that we do, and it actually performing well and all that stuff. And, we have great clients. I'm very fortunate that we don't get a lot of guff from them. But when it does happen, or someone says, I'm disappointed, that can send me into a spiral of like, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry, everyone.
But the flip side of that is, on the rare, and I mean, I'm not even sure I can count the amount of times on one hand that has happened. You always come back over the top.
Yeah.
You're like Stallone. You wrap the fingers, you turn the hat around.
You gotta turn the hat around.
You slam that thing down.
Yeah.
That was a perfect ending.
That's a good ending to this meeting.